This is CRM Audio, the Microsoft Business Applications podcast with Microsoft Business Applications MVPs Joel Lindstrom, Sean Tabor, and Scott LaFonte. This episode is brought to you by Maplytics by Inogic. Maplytics by Inogic is a market-leading certified for Microsoft Dynamics 365 geo-analytical mapping app. Maplytics empowers users with powerful map visualization and routing capabilities with Dynamics CRM to drive better sales, improve business processes, and engage the right customers at the right time. Maplytics now works with Dynamics 365 version 9 and Dynamics 365 app for mobile and tablet. Inogic is the leading Microsoft Gold Dynamics CRM ISV, delivering best-in-class Dynamics 365 solutions as well as cost-effective and high-quality programming services. We thank Maplytics by Inogic for sponsoring CRM Audio, the Microsoft Business Applications podcast.
All right, welcome to another episode of CRM Audio. We are recording live from the Microsoft Business Applications Summit. It's pretty exciting. We have myself, Sean Tabor, Joel Lindstrom, and Scott LaFonte here from the CRM Audio team. But more so than that, we have a special guest. Pretty excited. We've been talking about him coming on for a few weeks, especially over on the At Your Service podcast. We knew he was coming. We didn't know when, but we knew he was going to be here. And it's none other than Dan Gittler. Dan, how you doing?
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me. Really appreciate it.
Not a problem. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your role and what you do for the product?
Definitely. So my name's Dan Gittler. I'm a principal program manager at Microsoft, and I focus on a product called Universal Resource Scheduling. So Universal Resource Scheduling, in a nutshell, is a scheduling product which currently powers applications that we sell, such as field service and project service. And as we'll talk about, I'm sure, in this session, we have other applications such as customer service, and you can do a whole lot more with it. But
yeah, so where did URS come from? What's kind of its genesis story?
So it's actually it's kind of a fascinating story, or at least that's my opinion of it. So a little bit of background is I come from Field One, which was a field service application company which was acquired by Microsoft and is now Microsoft Field Service. So we came in, we had this whole big field service suite, part of it which is scheduling, part of it is which is the rest of the business process. So at the same time, while all the acquisition talks were happening, we had a team in Microsoft that was building project service. Project service is more about longer-term scheduling, project engagement, so you guys know the deal on that. Mm-hmm. So our orgs were merged, the acquisition happened, project service was going to market, and then we're looking at these two, and we're like, well, we're scheduling resources and you're scheduling resources. And that was kind of the beginning of what do we do with this? And that's kind of where the story continued from there.
Yeah, and so it was the amazing replacement of the legacy service calendar.
Yes.
There were many happy people, throwing rose petals in the air when we moved away from the old service scheduling.
So you mentioned project service, field service. The big change happened not extremely long ago where it was opened up where it made kind of the anything scheduling engine.
So as part of that first effort where we had this vision of we're going to go ahead and we're going to take these scheduling assets from Field 1, which became Field Service, and we're going to take the scheduling assets and the scenarios from Project Service. So at that point, we're scheduling two totally different work streams. We're scheduling work orders, we're scheduling projects. So at that point, realizing that we're not sure exactly how far this will end up going, right. But we realize that it doesn't make sense at that point to limit it to those two work streams because we saw the potential for, hey, customer service can use this, as you guys mentioned. Right. You can schedule leads with this. You can schedule anything you want. So it was built with being a platform at the core of it with the vision that other solutions later on, whether they're ISV solutions, whether they're first-party Microsoft solutions, would be able to leverage Universal Resource Scheduling for its scheduling needs. So that's kind of was at the core of the design from the outset, even though we were only targeting field and project service for the immediate work streams.
Yeah, and I think since it's come to this where we can schedule anything, even the progression of it, your team has done a fantastic job making it a lot easier to configure that, right? So it at first, when it first came out, you can schedule anything. To do the setup, it was a little confusing. People were overwhelmed, maybe myself included, occasionally. But now it's a couple clicks. You add this in, done.
Well, yeah, no, it's a great point. Thanks for the compliment on how easy it is to set that up now, Scott. So, to that point, that's the idea. When you're building, it's kind of a hybrid of an app in itself along with it serving as a platform. So it's important for us to be able to showcase how simple it would be to take the lead entity, and now I want to go and I want to schedule my sales reps to have visits to customer sites to try and sell them whatever the service or the product is that I'm trying to sell. So making it easy to be able to set it up initially, understand the concepts was really, really important to just unblock the thought in terms of what it can and can't do.
It's interesting you brought up leads, because I was working with a mortgage company the other week, and the scenario came up is we have leads come in and we need somebody jump on that right away because there's a ton of other mortgage companies and we want to make sure somebody's calling them. And so the question was, well, why don't we use URS to schedule that? And I thought that was a great idea. So since that's been open, what are some of the more unusual types of scheduling that you've seen people do outside of the typical field service and project service realms?
Yeah, so I think before I get radically wild with it, I'll kind of start at a more simple level. So I'm just going to assume field and project service, we have a general idea of what that is. But there's a lot of field service style scheduling, which doesn't require the entity such as work order, and it doesn't require product. So a lot of that typical those back office business processes that are field service focused aren't a part of it, but the scheduling is very in the field service world. So let me give you an example of a customer we have. So we have a customer, they're a large electronics organization, and they basically there's a new initiative to send out their specialists to customers' homes to sort of do this assessment of their in-home technology. And the customers are interested in potentially putting in a home theater, putting in surround sound. So when you think about it, that's what you would normally think of as field service, but it's not, right? It's field service in the sense that I need to care about travel. I need to care about location. I need to estimate how many hours it's going to take for them to perform that assessment. I need to make sure that whoever it is that I'm scheduling has the proper skill set to sell that type of product. So that would be sort of like a little bit of a fork in terms of it's in that field service on-site world, but it doesn't have any of the back office processes. Right. So that's kind of just a starting.
It's almost like a hybrid, so to speak, right? Because it is service, but it's in the same way you're sales, right? I mean, you're going in and you're recommending the products and the services that you need and that your company is going to sell.
Yeah, exactly. And what they don't even use your traditional service mobile application. When they get out in the field, they're opening up their laptops and they're going through typical Dynamics quoting and taking the process from there. So they're not going ahead and changing statuses and saying, I'm there, I'm traveling, I'm in progress. That's not the information this customer is tracking. That's not important. But they're not even using that typical field service mobile app, right? So that's, I think, it's not so off the wall, but that's like a starting point of a scenario. We can go into more.
So that's interesting. So what are some other unusual scenarios you see?
So on the other stream, we have an existing customer too that's using this for customer service scheduling. Now, when they're using this for, and not in the way that you guys are excited about the legacy scheduling replacement, they're using it to balance the caseload between their internal customer service reps. So it's not like a customer calls, I have a problem, let me transfer it to Scott or Sean or Joel, right? That's not what they're doing. They're basically saying, we have a case that's created. We understand what the problem's for. So let's just say it's for my laptop. Okay. So now, which of my customer support reps can I actually schedule that to? So if you think about that, that's completely about resource matching. So you have your skills that are required, you have your skills that are on the resource side, you have what's their historical sort of success with some of this information. So they're using it where they'll say, find a resource, it runs through all the universal resource scheduling APIs, and it says, great, this is the right resource for it. Then on the schedule board, using our extensibility, they're showing a little number that says how many cases are currently open for that customer service rep. So now they take a look at it, they say, great, I'm going to throw it into Joel's queue. And so now we're all load balanced, and you have 4, and you have 3, and I have 4, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So they're using it where from when it's assigned to the individual resource, they might not use the schedule board to say, okay, it's 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, and then 10 o'clock to 12. No, it's just, this is the resource that's assigned. They'll take that work, they'll balance themselves between all the cases that are assigned, and they'll go close them out. But it helps us to load balance and find the right resource with the right skills.
Right.
And I think go ahead.
It's interesting because that's a frequent request in customer service.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where you want to make sure that you don't have people and groups sitting around with nothing to do, and one person with 10 times is what they should have. So I like that work balancing.
The biggest thing that people, I think, misunderstand at times about universal resource scheduling is it's not just finding a time and a date for a resource to do something. The big key is, are they skilled enough to do it in a proficient manner that you want them to, right? That's the big difference, because I could create a custom activity and I could schedule anything, right? The big key is that whole skills, characteristics match up. Do they have the availability, and add that all together? That's the big key.
Yeah, and I would say that the other thing in this scenario is the visualization, right? I mean, let's face it. I mean, anyone can look at a list like in Excel or even a list in Dynamics, but the visualization of the schedule board, especially with the capability to have the different colors and, whether it's priority or it's a different type of case or a work order or whatever it may be, I mean, it really gives a little bit more insight as to what everyone is working on and what they're doing.
So now that we have a little bit of background on what URS has been, right? Let's look forward a little bit. One of the things that I saw in the release guide that was very intriguing was the API, right? Let's talk a little bit about what your hopes and expectations from a product-centric angle. What are you hoping people do with that API?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I think going back to, it segues nicely from Scott's point a moment ago, which is Scott's talking a lot about the visualization, the schedule board itself, and I'm extremely proud of that product that we have in market. But to your point, there is a separation between the back end and the front end. So, and sometimes the front end and the power of the schedule board, I think, could actually be a deterrent to an organization that isn't doing the traditional use case. It might stop them from trying to use universal resource scheduling because they see this schedule board and they're thinking, oh, if I need a schedule board, then that's the product I need. In reality, if you go back a moment ago to the scenario about the case management and sort of load balancing, so there is a persona or two, the resource manager or the case manager, that might deal with the actual scheduling, and they might use that visualization. But then the actual customer service reps, they might not work in the schedule board at all. So back to your question a moment ago. I look at this with the future of the product to, we'll continue to enhance the actual schedule board because that's a major piece of it, and we have wild extensibility in terms of what ISVs and partners can build on top of that schedule board in a supported way. But I also look at this as we're in the middle in the process of formalizing all our APIs that we use to be partner or customer facing, so that whatever your scenario might be, if it involves demand being work that needs to be done, supply being your resources, whether that's a person, whether that's a room, whether it's a piece of equipment, that you can use the whole suite, which is use our existing APIs in the back end, pair it with our schedule board and our front end tooling, or completely decouple them. And you can only use our APIs to find the proper resources for that work. And you can go ahead and you can expose that to your customer portal, to your Power App that you might be building. And that's kind of where we're looking to grow this as a platform as well as just a plug and play product.
I think there's a lot of value for other things like sales, because you've got certain industries like financial services or legal or mortgage, I mentioned before, insurance, where you have to be licensed in certain states for certain products before you can sell somebody something. And that's kind of challenging right now to manage that. And I think the skills and the licensing are very similar, where if you had a kind of a skill for license for a certain type of insurance in Missouri, and have that that doesn't necessarily have to be a slot on a calendar. It's just basically logic for assignment to a territory or a person or a team.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joel. And to your point, it doesn't have to be both. So it can be about the specific time, or it can be macros, more like project service, 40 hours over the month, or it could be just a straight resource match. It doesn't really make a difference. That the point is that you can kind of use it for what you need. So yeah, that's definitely where we're headed with it. And one interesting point you made, and this is probably digging a little deep for this show in terms of extensibility. So you're mentioning the idea of licensing in certain states, or maybe it's a concept of a certain language. So granted, you can absolutely model that with characteristics, and that could work. But it's already built in such a way where we have that extensibility, where you can come in, use universal resource scheduling, have your own solution. So let's say it's a solution like you were just mentioning. You're a partner, you install it, and now you can ship extensible business logic on top of universal resource scheduling, where you might have an entity called certifications, which is different than characteristics. And all our scheduling logic can leverage all those custom entities that you ship right out of the box.
That's fantastic. And I can really see a lot of use cases, especially in financial services, where with another new feature with the resource pool scheduling. I could be a wealth manager who has a team of 5 different assistants, and I know that with a new client onboarding, I'm going to go through and create document packets, and I'm going to get agreements, and I'm going to get appointments signed. With that pool scheduling, I don't care who's doing it. I just know I can schedule the pool, and whoever fulfills it, great. But it all goes to one place, and they all know where to go to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. And pool scheduling's something, if those who have already had the chance to read the 2 million page document that has just been released. So it's in the universal resource scheduling section, and it's super exciting because exactly as you described it, it lets me define capacity at a level that's not for an individual resource. And that's extremely powerful from a scenario perspective. If you think about like a retail scenario where you have customers that are coming in for consultations, I might not need or want in advance to decide, all right, well, who's going to take it? Is it going to be Sean? Is it going to be Scott? Right? It's just, do I have capacity? Will someone be available? Yes, book it. And then we can leave it to the local branch manager to decide who's going to do it. Or maybe we just have a big board. The customer walks in, whoever's available and free, just grabs that customer at the front door and says, hi, what's your name? Great, I'll take you here. But we can't overstaff it, right? We can't have 100 appointments if there's 4 people working. So that pool concept, it's really, really big one. And the scenarios that it unblocks and it's also the beginning of a capacity management journey, right? So we're laying down the foundation for a lot of that work that we see ahead in our future.
Yeah. So what about the Power App story? I mean, it seems like, well, before I ask you Power App story, what about the question I'm sure you get all the time, is URS going to be a solution that I can license and install without having to do field service or project service?
Yeah, so the feedback, especially from this MVP community, has been very strong in that this is an ask. It sounds like it's an ask for a few different reasons. So it's something we are definitely exploring, and a lot of different moving parts with the actual business team and licensing and making sure it all works. But we're exploring it, and we've definitely heard that feedback that it's a desire to be able to ship it as a separate solution.
Right. And then the Power Apps question was, now that we're in the business applications platform and we're all Power Apps now, there's been expressed by several people the desire to say build a simple dispatch app or something and be able to leverage some of those controls from a Canvas app. Anything like that in the works?
Yeah, for sure. So we actually put in the release notes, it's a little bit vague, but there's something in the Universal Resource Scheduling section that literally says a Power Apps sample app. So
I saw that.
Yeah. That might be the cue for the question.
Exactly, yeah.
So the idea of it is to set the guidance for how our customers and partners can leverage universal resource scheduling even outside of our traditional tools like the schedule board that we offer. So we're eager to collect some of these scenarios from the community. The ones we've heard a lot are, hey, I might walk into a shop and there's like this greeter app, and I want to quickly see who's available to talk to this customer that might have a match of background, culture, or skill set, or whatever it might be. And so that is the idea. So the first step in that is what we started with earlier on, is formalized APIs, right? So if we're going to go ahead and tell you, use the Canvas apps to go ahead and call Universal Resource Scheduling, get the resource availability, and book it, then the first step is formalizing those APIs, and that's where the Power App will come along with it. So we'll formalize, we'll ship some sample apps, not to be confused with an official supported app, but just the guidance of how can you interact with all that great back-end logic that we have.
Well, yeah, and I think that's great because one of the big things that we hear a lot now is this concept of self-scheduling and allowing partners to also schedule, or customers to schedule for partners or someone in our company, and I need this widget fixed. So I think having that flexibility and that capability is going to be a tremendous asset to what's already there.
Can you see a time where and with the API, it sounds like the time is now, I guess, where let's say you go on the partner portal, and I'm a partner, and my skills and characteristics are in the system, and whether I'm a contact in there or I'm a user, it doesn't matter, and I get a list of work orders that are open unscheduled, and I can match my characteristics to those work orders to define what is my pool of potential things that I could book for myself.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've had this in my dream roadmap for a couple of years now. I was dubbing it the reverse schedule assistant. So instead of selecting the demand and finding where the requirement, finding the supply, the resource, it's the opposite. It's here I am, what work do you have for me? So it's definitely something we've thought about and talked about a lot, so it won't come in this next wave. But it's definitely on the roadmap for sure.
Yeah. And I remember something along those lines when the project service app first came out as a resource. You could sit there and say, "Hey, I'm Scott. I'm an architect. What projects are there?" It was kind of in its infancy state. It didn't take off because I think at that time project service was new, but now we're seeing more and more of that need. And so I'm curious to see and excited to see when that comes.
Yeah, for sure. We've actually had some a partner hack away at it and make it work, where they were using the schedule assistant, passing in the resource's current location as basically as if it was a requirement. So they did some creative stuff. It was amazing. They kind of had it working there. But yeah, it's definitely something. We were closer to doing it, and then we introduced extensibility, which sort of totally changed how everything worked under the hood when it comes to searching for resource. So we kind of paused that, finished it up, and now we'll come back hopefully in a couple waves and complete that.
With all the new ways that we're able to schedule, with pools, with crews, with just the multiple resources on a single work order, for example, how does that change how we implement requirements and characteristics and skills in terms of, are there priorities now? Are there, if you're looking at requirements for a resource, can you weight them or make some more important than the others?
So the good thing is none of that's really changed. So the existing structure of whatever your work stream might be, if it's work orders, projects, cases, the requirement still has a priority. Depending on how you implement, you might have a list of whether it's work orders, cases, or just requirements not tied to any work stream. However you're doing that before to prioritize what gets scheduled when, you're still able to implement that the same way. So right now when it comes to requirement groups, when you're scheduling, and when I say that I mean multi-resource scheduling. So for right now we're scheduling in the first wave, the team gets scheduled all at once. Right. So that means if we're looking for a room and a person and a piece of equipment, then we're looking for what time slot can they all converge to meet that demand. So you don't need to balance the priority of a requirement within that requirement group because we're scheduling it all together. So however it is that you're balancing that outside of the group, so just sorting by priority in general, then all that remains exactly the same.
Right. And one thought I had was if I have like 3 engineers and a piece of equipment that does, that's required for the inspection, how can I determine, and I think I might have answered it while I'm asking the question, but that's okay. It's a good question anyway. I know someone's thinking it. How do you determine that you have all the resources to be able to use that machine outside of having a characteristic against the machine, I guess? So
just to repeat the question, make sure I get it. So we're saying I need to find, let's say, an MRI machine, right, and I need an MRI technician, and I need a room the room in that scenario, it's pretty large equipment, you're not moving
right.
it, but let's leave it at that scenario.
Right.
So the beauty is that becomes a requirement group, which is a container for a bunch of requirements. The requirement itself you articulate, you say, this requirement needs to be a resource type of equipment. and the characteristic is it's MRI. You have a separate requirement that says I need a user or an account or a contact, however you're modeling your resource pool,
right?
And I need that to have the characteristic of an MRI technician. Just by clicking Find Availability, we're going to assemble teams of resources together that actually will tell you 9 o'clock, that's when this team can come together. If one of them's not available at 9, the team's just simply not available. So that's built into sort of the out-of-the-box scheduling logic that we're shipping. It's going to be GA in this next wave.
Yeah, that's cool. So what is the status of Unified Client with Universal Resource Scheduling? Is it fully UCI yet, or when will it be?
So all of our forms and views, you're going to see it go into, we already have it all out in preview. It'll be officially GA shortly, where all of the forms and views are completely part of UCI. Yeah, and one of the things I'm curious to hear from you guys is that we have, at least in the vision of where we looked at universal resource scheduling, specifically through the lens of extensibility, was the idea that you might have a very specific vertical. Let's just say it's pest control, right? That's within the field service realm, but there's nuance to scheduling pest control company as opposed to an air conditioning company. So I don't know, have you seen any sort of a vertical demand where maybe shipping an application on top of universal resource scheduling with custom scheduling logic built into that solution with a separate filter control that's filtering based on some kind of, so look at the pest control industry. You have some resources, they're allowed, based on the customer side and the resource side, they're allowed to just walk into the backyard and do all the spraying, and that's it. Others, it needs to be carefully coordinated to the customer's home. So I was curious if you've seen any specific verticals where you can see building solutions on top of universal resource scheduling?
I think scheduling for individuals and consumers is different than scheduling for businesses. You know, when you got a lot more variability for the cable guy coming to your house than you do for somebody who provides business janitorial services.
Well, I see it in a case where if customers have customers that are using scheduling and using Dynamics, it really, I see it, and we see it now in our project that certain customers have specific requirements. You cannot step into this building until you meet X, Y, and Z. That has to be done. So I think we see it a lot, and it really varies on the type of customer they're dealing with. They need certain clearance, they need certain training, they need insurance. Those kinds of things we're seeing more and more crop up.
Yeah, the manufacturing vertical has a lot of those scenarios where like Scott's saying, they have site instructions, they have certification requirements, they have safety limitations, all of that. So that kind of major manufacturing, big unit installation, kind of thing, I think is would be a big player in that. And especially if you think of let's say the trucking industry, okay, you have to have a certain license in order to haul radioactive materials, or you have to have a certain security clearance to get into certain environments.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a truck size, right? So if you wanted to model, let's say you have work orders and work order products. If you wanted to model, we don't have this out of the box, but the products, you can put dimensions, right? If you have your resources, which you related to an entity called the truck, and the truck has dimensions, so now all of a sudden, with the extensibility, you can add the concept that when I search for availability, don't schedule a work order if it has a product where the dimension is greater than that of the truck. So that's the kind of scenarios that I was.
I think garbage is an interesting scenario. I've talked to garbage companies.
I don't think I've ever heard that term before. Garbage is an interesting
scenario. But you consider dumpsters. You got some dumpsters that are picked up on the side, some that are picked up on the back of the truck, and if you send the wrong truck, you can't pick up the dumpster.
Yep.
And they got a tight time window that they got to do that in. So yeah, you've got some really, really specific, industry specific things. And that's where I don't know that you as Microsoft can come up with an overlay for all that, but by opening it up with the API and extensibility, just like the rest of the platform, I think that's the best answer. And let the garbage partner, come up with the garbage extension, that extends it.
Well, and taking it back to service scheduling, because I do want to cover that a little bit more. that's a scenario where we're going back to services and service activities, but now we would have services, and now we have work order services, and we have products that are services. So we have multiple service.
With the word service.
We have a service, much like I think last release it was Insights. That was the big buzz. Everything had Insights on it. But so with the services and service activities, is the thought there not necessarily like the load balancing you mentioned earlier, but more akin to the actions taken by a call center agent or a technical service agent, in who's best able to do that? Is that really where we're going with the customer service scheduling?
Yeah, so if we go back to kind of the way that's the schema today and how that tooling works. So you have a service, and the service has a bunch of selection rules, which allows you to define, give me one person from this group or two people from that group, and they have to be from the same site or they could be from different sites. So that's the structure of how that works today. So we're shipping the same concept in a very with a different implementation, where that detail of how you can fulfill that service is now being ported over into a combination of requirements within a requirement group. So in that requirement group, I can say, give me 2 juniors or 1 senior with these characteristics, and you can create this selection criteria with this different tree of requirements where you can say, I need everyone from this branch, or I need only one of these branches that I define. So that's analogous to the service side, where the service is kind of what you got to do, and then you have all the rules. So that's being ported to requirement groups and requirements. Then as far as comes to finding availability, that concept remains the same, where you sort of have this appointment that you might want to schedule, or you have an object that needs to be scheduled. Mm-hmm. I say, find me resources. And from a flow, just like in the service scheduling, it would present to you a team of resources. From a flow perspective, we're targeting that same exact work stream, hopefully in a way that is extensible so that partners can pick that up and extend it from there.
One last question on this, but do you see a point when you're going to have the ability to say that in this resource pool, it needs to be a remote assist meeting? For example, you have in the demos we saw here at Business App Summit, where much like when I'm scheduling a meeting with Scott, I schedule a Skype meeting and it puts a link in there. Do you see that kind of capability where you can indicate what vehicles you're using for those events are built in and automated?
Yeah, no question about it. I've had that in my backlog for a bit as well. So that's definitely something that we're targeting. Hopefully, it's something that even you guys can go ahead and implement on a case-by-case basis as needed. I don't see why you'd be blocked, but as far as shipping it out of the box, definitely something we definitely are going to walk towards.
So when you've had like monthly releases for URS, do you get feedback from customers or clients where they say, I wish it could do this, and you say, well, we added that 4 months ago? I mean, is there something you see a lot of people missing or doing things a harder way than they would otherwise see? What's the top 1 or 2 things that you wish that they're in there that maybe you wish more people knew about, or that people could do to more efficiently manage their schedules?
Yeah, so I think that we don't get too much of, hey, we released that just now and you're already, we get a lot of, we just released it and you're 3 versions behind. So hopefully with the new release cadence, 3 is probably opportunistic. It's often more than that. So I think with the new release cadence that the whole entire organization is going to go by, that should really help a lot with that. I'm so excited by that also, because every time we're, a bug is one thing, but a lot of the time it's a scenario completion that we're trying to ship, and it's like, all right, we're going to ship it on the next release. How far back do we go? Because we want our customers to sort of have delightful experiences. So that should be a really, really important thing for us to keep enhancing it. Because if we can focus on fewer versions, I think it'll bring a good amount of customer value for sure.
And if you want to know what the latest release for URS has been, just tune into At Your Service, because we go over it every month.
That's true.
Like clockwork.
Yeah, we go over it. We blog about it. Actually, I think I'm overdue for an updated resource scheduling blog. So stay tuned.
Well, with what's about to drop in officially in preview in the next very, very short period, and you saw a lot of it listed in what's coming for GA in the overall release notes, you'll have a lot to blog about. No question about it.
All right. Well, it's about to get loud because the keynote just got out
Yes,
here.
it is.
Dan, we appreciate you coming on here.
Thanks very much.
We'd love to have you back, maybe to talk about some developer stuff and SDK level stuff. We're not developers, don't claim to be, but George really wants to ask you a few questions about that. So we appreciate your time.
Yeah, no question. Thank you, guys. We didn't even get to the find me a priest scenario, but we'll get that.
Oh, yes.
Well, we'll get you back on and talk about that.
Yeah,
You betcha.
I need to hear that one, absolutely.
Yeah, no question. Thank you guys so much.
This has been CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast. Send us your feedback at voice@crm.audio. Check out our other shows at crm.audio or subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and any place else podcasts are offered. This podcast is a production of Dynamics Podcast LLC.